Hi, my name is David Vidler, and I'm going to be talking on 1960s, mostly on JFK's presidency. And just a little bit of background on JFK. He was a very popular president. He was a very strong supporter of the civil rights as well. And within his first year of presidency, he faced a national threat called the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Still to this day, there is major speculation on his assassination, as most of the witnesses, or most people that were involved, were, usually, or most of them died. But because of that, it's raised a lot of conspiracies. But overall, he faced a lot of challenges early in his career. And the first one he took on was the civil rights movement. That started back in the very 1960s, very early 60s. But one of the very first things, majorly important things, was in the spring of 1963, he helped organize the March of Washington. And this is the most important protest where Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. And it was mostly successful because there were no arrests during this protest. In June of 1963, two students were trying to attend Alabama University. And the governor of Alabama kept his promise in saying that he would stand in the schoolhouse door and deny entrance of the students. JFK's response to this was that he federalized the Alabama National Guard to protect the students on their admissions, and he addressed the nation later that night and defined the civil rights movement as a moral and constitutional movement. While the civil rights movement was very important at home, there were international issues rising in Cuba. At 8:45 a.m. on October 16, 1962, National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy alerted President Kennedy that a major international crisis was at hand. 2 days earlier, a United States military surveillance aircraft had taken hundreds of aerial photographs of Cuba. And what these photographs contained were Soviet missile sites. And as you can see, here's a map of Cuba that they actually used during discussions. And all these little dots on the map represent a specific site that was found. And there in Cuba, they found approximately 16 of 32 missiles, nuclear missiles. And being so close to home, they would be able to launch a nuclear attack whenever they wanted to. And the Soviets, in response to sending military aid to Cuba, said that this was purely defensive and that it was not a threat to the U.S. As a country. JFK didn't really believe so, and so what he did was he used the Rio Treaty Act of 1948 in order to monitor what was coming in and out of Cuba. Just as a little background, the Rio Treaty Act basically said that any attack on a Western Hemisphere country meant an attack on them all, and so if the Soviets were trying to place an attack there, he was able to kind of intervene, and he was able to act. And the Soviets, they didn't really like this idea. It wasn't really received well. And Khrushchev, the Soviet, president, said that he wrote a letter to Kennedy saying that he was no longer appealing to reason, and instead he was intimidating the Soviet Union. Finally, though, on October 28th, 1963, an agreement was finally reached, and basically the U.S. promised to take down missile sites in Turkey, and promised not to invade Cuba and to lift the quarantine, and then the Soviets would dismantle the sites and bring everything out of Cuba. So, despite his bravery and his willpower through this devastating situation, his career was short-lived. And in November 22nd of 1963, he was assassinated in broad daylight, waving to crowds in Dallas, Texas. Shots broke out at 12:30 p.m. and he was severely injured. He was shot in the head, actually. And he died on the way to hospital around 1 p.m. The really weird thing about it is no one was actually found guilty of the crime. Oswald was killed 2 days after he was arrested, and he was killed by Jack Ruby on live television, and my grandmother's quoted as saying it was like scripted for a TV show that you would see today, but it was real and happened on TV. And Jack Ruby later died a few months later in December, and he was never tried either. So all evidence that could have possibly come out was gone. And so this led to multiple conspiracy theories. Some said it was an inside job of the U.S. government, either to keep segregation or maybe to keep Vietnam involvement. Well, my grandmother still believes that it was part of the Chicago mob, as Kennedy and his brother were working diligently to stop organized crime. So as you can see, Kennedy had a large plate when he came into office in 1960, and he had a huge impact on the lives of U.S. citizens. From the Cuban Missile Crisis to civil rights, it's hard to believe that someone would assassinate him, but I guess with strong opinions comes strong oppositions, and boy, did those strong oppositions come knocking. But overall, he showed us to accept one another and to help bring America forward. So I hope that everyone here does that as well.